The walls of the Interstellar Zoological Research Institute shimmered faintly under the artificial daylight of the orbiting academic station Kestrin 9. Inside the main observation dome, a dozen alien students stood behind a reinforced energy barrier, their eyes wide and stalks raised, staring at the beast pacing inside the containment enclosure. It was huge, easily over 2 meters tall at the shoulder, covered in thick, dark fur that bristled with each calculated step. Muscles rippled beneath the hide as it moved, claws clicking against the titanium floor. Every few seconds, it let out a low, guttural growl that made the light panels in the ceiling vibrate. "Is it agitated?" asked Gylax, whose bioluminescent skin flickered with nervous pulses. "It appears to be in a heightened emotional state," said Professor Rel, adjusting the sensor node embedded near his eye. "Elevated heart rate, defensive posture, dilation of pupils. Yes, we are witnessing a classic display of terrestrial aggression." The beast turned abruptly, snarled at the viewing glass, and slammed a paw against it. Several students flinched. Then from the side door, a man walked in. He was average height for a human, lean but strong, with short brown hair and a limp that made his right foot drag just slightly. He wore a gray jumpsuit with grease stains and a name patch that read Shane Norwell. He carried a metal lunchbox in one hand and a folded-up towel in the other. The students froze, watching him approach the enclosure like a man greeting an old friend. "Mr. Norwell, do not enter the containment zone," warned Professor Rel. "The specimen is highly volatile." Shane raised his hand without looking back. "Relax. He's just cranky." The beast turned at the sound of Shane's voice. His growl rose, chest expanding like a bellows. The claws clicked louder now, faster. It hunched low, eyes locked on Shane, and then charged. Gylax gasped. 2 students shrieked. Professor Rel instinctively reached for the emergency tranquilizer control. But Shane didn't flinch. He dropped the lunchbox, stepped into the enclosure just as the beast lunged, and knelt. "Easy, buddy. I know. Long day." The beast skidded to a halt inches from Shane, panting. His eyes, yellow and wide, blinked. Then, with a huff, it lowered its head and nudged Shane's chest. Shane chuckled and reached up slowly, gently rubbing the creature just above its eyes. "He just wants head pats," Shane said, glancing over his shoulder at the stunned aliens. "That's all." The room was silent except for the soft, rhythmic sound of Shane patting the monster's head. The beast's tail thumped once, then again, finally curling around Shane's legs as it flopped beside him with a satisfied grunt. Professor Rel blinked twice. That is not in the behavioral profile." Shane shrugged. "Well, maybe your scanners are missing something." Gylax raised one of his eye stalks. "Is it a domesticated variant?" "Nope," Shane said, sitting cross-legged and pulling a small sandwich from his lunchbox. "Got him off the Martian reclamation zone 3 years ago. He was half-starved, scared of everything. Took a while, but we figured it out." The beast, classified as a Terran-Ursicine hybrid, grunted and licked Shane's cheek before resting its massive head in his lap. "What is the purpose of the tactile contact?" asked a thin alien with translucent skin. Shane glanced at the alien. "Head pats. Calming. Makes him feel safe. Trust thing." A chime echoed through the observation dome. Professor Rel stepped away to answer a comm call. "You're not supposed to be in there," said Gylax, stepping closer to the glass. "That creature is biologically engineered to survive acid storms and crush steel." "Yup," said Shane, taking a bite of his sandwich. "Also loves peanut butter." The beast snuffled at Shane's bag, sniffing for treats. Another student, smaller and green-scaled, raised a trembling hand. "What if it turns on you?" Shane looked down at the beast curled around him. "Then I'm screwed." The student recoiled. "You are. Comfortable with that risk?" "No," Shane said, "but I'm comfortable with him." The professor returned, agitated. "Mr. Norwell, I just received a report from administration. That animal is scheduled for transfer to the Anderith dissection lab for structural analysis." Shane's eyes narrowed. Like hell he is. The board has approved it. The data gathered from his physiology could advance bioengineering across 6 sectors. He's not a data point, Shane said, standing up slowly. The beast rose with him, sensing the tension. He's a living creature. Professor Rel shook his head. Then you must prove he can be safely handled without sedation. That was the condition of the board. Shane looked at the alien students. You all want to learn something real about Earth creatures? About trust? Then come in one at a time. Gylax immediately backed away. Absolutely not. But the green-scaled student hesitated. Shane's gaze softened. Just kneel down. Let him sniff you. The student stepped through the containment door, trembling. The beast stood still, eyes watching him. Shane motioned to him slowly. Good. Now kneel. Hands open. The student followed the instructions. The beast approached, sniffed the air, then licked the alien's hand. The student gasped. He accepts you, Shane said. The student looked back at the others. It's warm. Shane smiled. Yeah, he runs hot. Over the next 2 hours, 4 more brave students entered the enclosure. Each had a moment of fear, a breathless pause, and then something quiet and profound as the beast accepted their presence. At the end of the session, Professor Rel stood in silence, watching the animal nuzzle its face into Shane's side as he packed up his lunchbox. You have made your case, Rel finally said. I will appeal the transfer. Shane nodded. Appreciate it. He turned to leave, but the beast whimpered. I'll be back in a few hours, Shane said, rubbing behind its ears. You've got your toys. Behave. Okay. The beast huffed, then padded to the corner of its enclosure and curled up. The containment door shut behind Shane as he limped into the hallway. Rel caught up with him. Your leg, he said. Is it from the animal? Shane shook his head. Old job. Structural collapse on Io. Crushed my tibia. Took a year to walk right again. Rel looked back at the enclosure. Yet you trust a creature that could shatter your spine in a second. Shane paused. Yeah, because he trusts me too. 2 days later, the board issued a directive. The Ursicine hybrid would be reclassified as a research partner, not a specimen. Shane and the beast officially named Brutus were assigned to the Behavioral Cognition Division. Not everyone was happy about it. 6 weeks into the new arrangement, a containment protocol failed during a station-wide power surge. Brutus escaped, wandering into the lower mechanical levels. Panic spread through the station. Security teams were dispatched. Shane was asleep in the crew quarters when the alarms went off. He grabbed his boots, slipped them on without socks, and sprinted toward engineering. He found Brutus cornered by 2 security officers, both raising ion rifles. Stand down, one shouted. It's hostile. Don't shoot. Shane barked, sliding between them and the beast. He's scared. Brutus growled, backing against the wall, eyes wild. Shane knelt slowly, hands out. Brutus. Hey, it's okay. You're not in trouble. The beast whined, then lunged not at Shane, but around him, knocking him down as it tried to flee. One of the guards fired by reflex. The bolt grazed Shane's ribs. He hit the floor hard, gasping. Brutus roared, spun around, and stood over Shane, shielding him with its body. The guards froze. Shane coughed, clutching his side. You two better lower those guns before he tears the deck apart. The second guard raised his hands. Okay. Okay. Brutus stayed crouched over Shane until the emergency lights dimmed and medical personnel arrived. Shane was taken to the infirmary, the burn on his ribs deep but not life-threatening. He needed 2 weeks of rest, light therapy, and pain suppressants. During his recovery, Brutus refused to eat until he was allowed to curl up outside the medbay door. Students came by, dropping off drawings of Shane and Brutus, their earlier fear now replaced with awe. One day, Gylax visited. I was wrong, he said quietly. Shane turned his head, groggy but conscious. About what? Gylax placed a small carved figure on the bedside table, a crude likeness of Brutus with exaggerated paws. About what makes a creature dangerous. It's not the claws. It's what it's willing to protect. Shane chuckled softly, wincing. Well, he said, he just wants head pats. And in the hallway, Brutus thumped his tail. Brutus's claws clicked softly against the floor as he paced the corridor outside the medbay, tail low and ears twitching at every distant footstep. The corridor lights dimmed slightly on a preset cycle, signaling rest hours, but the beast showed no interest in sleep. Every few minutes, he would press his snout gently to the reinforced door, then resume his slow, anxious circuit. Inside, Shane lay propped on a semi-rigid support pad, one arm looped behind his head, the other resting just above the bandage on his ribs. The burn dressing itched like hell, but he wasn't about to scratch it off and start over. He'd already negotiated away the standard immobilization shell. Too confining, he'd said. The medtechs hadn't liked it, but they'd relented when he pointed out he needed to breathe without feeling like he was wearing a coffin. A dull ache radiated outward with each breath, but he was lucid, and more importantly, bored. At the far end of the room, a pale blue alien with a narrow vertical pupil and 6 long fingers was typing on a translucent panel. Its name badge read Hendrix. You could have been dead, Hendrix said without turning. Had the bolt struck 2 centimeters deeper, your liver would have ruptured. You're not wrong, Shane replied. But I've always been more of a close enough guy. Hendrix paused, its long neck tilting slightly. This is not a personality trait to be proud of. Never said I was proud. Shane exhaled slowly. I just knew he wouldn't run without me. Hendrix turned this time, walking over with a slow, deliberate gait. I reviewed the station's logs. You reached the containment breach 6 minutes before the security detail. How? I used the lift shaft, Shane said, wincing as he shifted his weight. Maintenance access. Drops you 2 levels down if you know where to kick. The alien's eye narrowed. You dropped 2 levels with a fractured rib cage? I was mostly vertical before gravity noticed, Shane muttered. Look, are you here to patch me up or lecture me into a coma? I was not assigned your case. I volunteered, Hendrix replied. I wanted to understand what compels a species to submit itself to danger without strategic gain. Brutus is my friend, Shane said, as if that explained everything. Hendrix considered this for several seconds. Friendship, then. An alliance not based on reproductive necessity or tactical advantage, but emotional reciprocity. Exactly, Shane said. You get it. No, Hendrix replied, but I am mapping the concept. The medbay door hissed open, and a familiar clicking followed. Gylax entered, his skin pulsing with soft green hues now, far calmer than his usual lavender panic tones. You are upright, Gylax observed, stepping around the bed. That is unexpected. I heal fast when guilt's involved, Shane said. What's the word? Gylax pulled a small data rod from his belt. There's a formal inquiry underway. Station Command wants to know why a non-domesticated hybrid was permitted to roam unsecured. Roam? Shane scoffed. He got spooked and wandered into a corridor. They classified it as a level 4 breach, Gylax said. Risk to personnel, risk to systems, and an implied failure in containment. Containment failed because the power grid blew a relay, Shane replied. Pretty sure that's not Brutus's fault. They are less interested in causality than optics. One of the guards has filed for reassignment. Claims he was psychologically destabilized by the incident. Shane snorted. He fired first. Yes, Gylax said. And you took the bolt instead. Hendrix interjected, which, to be clear, is medically ill-advised. No kidding, Shane muttered. A soft whine echoed from the hallway. Gylax turned toward the door. He's been there since they brought you in, he said. Shane shifted to a seated position with a grimace. Open it. You are not cleared for movement. I'm not moving. Just open it. Gylax hesitated, then tapped a command into his wristband. The door slid open and Brutus padded in, head low, tail dragging. Hey, buddy, Shane said, voice softer now. Brutus approached slowly, his breath warm and heavy. He sat beside the bed, resting his chin on the edge, his eyes locked on Shane's. He hasn't eaten, Gylax noted. I noticed, Shane said, reaching a hand down to scratch behind Brutus's ear. You're being dramatic, you big baby. Brutus let out a long, low huff and leaned into the touch. Do you intend to keep the animal here indefinitely? Henix asked. He's not going anywhere until I'm back on my feet, Shane replied. Gylax tapped his chin. There's growing interest in testing his cognitive range. Several departments are submitting requests to observe his behavior in variable environments. He's not a lab rat, Shane snapped. No, but his reactions under stress could offer insights into cross-species emotional frameworks. Brutus grunted and shifted closer to Shane. You want to learn about emotional frameworks? Shane asked. Start by watching how he acts when I'm not in pieces. There was a silence, not tense exactly, but uncertain. Then Gylax said, would he allow others to touch him while you are incapacitated? Shane looked down at Brutus. Depends on who. Gylax turned to Henix. You are the least threatening among us. Incorrect, Henix replied. I once dissected a living symbiote while it was still communicating with its host. Still, Gylax said. You lack a face. That is irrelevant. Just try. Henix approached slowly. Brutus raised his head, watching with narrowed eyes. When Henix extended a hand, Brutus sniffed it, then quickly turned away and pressed closer to Shane's side. Rejection, Henix said flatly. He doesn't know you, Shane said. Start with eye contact. Slow movements. No hovering. Henix tried again, this time kneeling. Brutus sniffed cautiously, then allowed a brief touch to the shoulder before turning back to Shane. Progress, Gylax said, surprised. Yeah, Shane muttered. Takes time. You don't get trust with a clipboard. A quiet chime echoed through the station's internal PA system. Henix checked his panel. Command has summoned the Behavioral Ethics Committee. They're reviewing whether to place Brutus under sedation until further analysis can be conducted. Shane's jaw tightened. What time? Standard cycle, third quadrant. Roughly 3 hours. Then we've got 3 hours to prove sedation isn't necessary. Gylax raised a brow ridge. You intend to perform a demonstration? Something like that, Shane said, already easing his legs over the side of the bed. The motion sent a sharp jolt through his side, and he gritted his teeth. You are not stable, Henix protested. I'm stable enough. Your vitals suggest otherwise. Shane looked down at Brutus. You up for a walk? Brutus stood immediately and nudged Shane's knee with his snout. Great, Shane muttered. Let's show them what partnership looks like. 3 hours later, the main auditorium was packed with station personnel, ethicists, researchers, and several high-ranking observers from interspecies relations. The lights dimmed slightly as Shane limped onto the platform, Brutus walking beside him at perfect pace. No leash. No collar. No guards. Shane stopped at center stage and winced as he turned to face the crowd. I'm not here to give a speech, he said. I'm here to show you something. He dropped a ragged old glove onto the floor, then took 3 steps back. Find it. Brutus sniffed the air, padded forward, and retrieved the glove gently between his teeth. He set it at Shane's feet and looked up expectantly. Now sit. Brutus sat. Now lie down. Brutus flopped sideways, tail swishing lazily. There were murmurs from the crowd. Roll. The beast rolled onto his back, paws in the air. Now stop showing off, Shane muttered. Brutus barked once, a deep, muffled sound. The room fell completely silent. Shane turned slowly. You think sedation is the answer? You want to shove a needle into a creature that's already proven he's capable of learning, of trust, of restraint. He pointed at Brutus. He didn't become safe because we built a better cage. He became safe because someone gave him a reason to be. There was no applause. Just stunned silence and a few furrowed brows. But no one moved to remove the creature. And for Shane, that was enough. Shane's ribs ached like hell, but at least the bruising had settled into a steady, manageable throb. He ditched the sling after the second day, technically against advisement, but the medtechs had stopped fighting him once he demonstrated he could reach the floor, tie his boots, and stand up again without assistance. That last part had taken some stubborn groaning and a near fall, but he'd managed it. And no one wanted to argue with a man whose best friend could bite through a bulkhead. The Behavioral Ethics Committee had convened again 48 hours after the demonstration. This time behind closed doors. No live stream, no spectators. Just data ads, long silences, and a lot of alien eyebrows twitching in what Shane had learned was the equivalent of bureaucratic exasperation. He hadn't been invited, but Brutus had. The beast had sat upright, perfectly still, ears perked, tail curled neatly around his haunches, while 6 different species asked him to respond to hundreds of stimuli. Holograms, scents, recorded sounds, even a simulated threat display from a known predator species. Brutus had yawned once, scratched his ear with the back of a claw, and resumed watching the nearest committee member with the quiet alertness of a creature who knew exactly where the door was and how fast he could get there if needed. Now, late into the evening cycle, Shane leaned on a handrail in the Arboretum Dome, the only place on the station with live vegetation and enough ambient humidity to make his lungs feel normal. Brutus lay nearby, paws tucked under his chest, watching a small group of glowing insects flit among the leaves of a low tree. Gylax arrived without ceremony, his skin showing a dull gradient of beige. He approached carefully, stopping a respectful distance from Brutus. "You were right," Gylax said. "About what?" The committee voted. "No sedation. No relocation. He stays." Shane exhaled, letting the tension bleed out of his shoulders. "They've classified him as a sentient adjacent entity capable of consent-based interaction," Gylax continued. "It's a new designation. They made it for him." Shane let out a quiet chuckle. Could have saved themselves a week if they'd just come down here and watched him play with that butterfly. Gylax's gaze followed Brutus's eyes to the insect. "It's not a butterfly." "Close enough." "No," Gylax said. "It secretes a paralytic enzyme. It is highly toxic." Brutus sneezed, startling the insect into a loop before it zipped away. Shane watched it vanish into the canopy. "Still pretty." Gylax didn't respond. He studied Shane for a long moment, then gestured at the bench beside him. "May I?" "Sure." Gylax sat, his frame folding awkwardly to fit the human-sized furniture. "I reviewed your medical scans," he said after a moment. "You have 3 microfractures that did not appear on the initial assessment." "I figured." "You didn't report the pain." "I figured." "You were aware that untreated microfractures can result in calcification anomalies." "Yeah." "Why?" Shane rubbed his temple. "Because if I went back into the mebe, they'd make me stay. And Brutus would panic again." Gylax tapped his fingers together. "You value his emotional stability above your skeletal integrity." "I'm not saying it's smart. I'm saying it's mine to choose." Brutus shifted slightly, resting his chin on one paw. The movement was slow, deliberate. "He understands," Gylax said. "I know." A soft rustle from behind them made both look up. Hennix approached, holding a small readout panel. "I brought the final report," Hennix said. The committee included a clause that requires at least one qualified observer present during any future public interaction. "I figured that was coming too," Shane said. "They asked me to volunteer." Shane raised an eyebrow. "You?" "I thought you preferred things with no emotional unpredictability." "I do," Hennix replied. "But unpredictability, once mapped, becomes data. I intend to map it." Brutus raised his head and huffed. Hennix hesitated, then extended the data panel. Brutus sniffed it, then returned to watching the glowing canopy. "He approves," Shane said. "I am uncertain if that was approval." "He didn't eat it. That's approval." Hennix tilted his head, then nodded. "Noted." The Arboretum lights dimmed slightly as the station cycled into its rest phase. A low chime sounded somewhere in the distance, followed by the soft hum of the air filtration system adjusting for nighttime oxygen levels. Gylax stood. "I must return to my quarters. There is a report due on cross-species empathy indicators." "Good luck with that." "I will need it." Hennix lingered as Gylax departed, taking the seat he'd vacated. "I have a question," Hennix said. "Shoot." When you first encountered him, how did you know he wouldn't kill you? Shane scratched his chin. I didn't. Then why approach? Because he was cornered and I hate seeing anything scared and alone. Henix processed that in silence. Brutus shifted again, this time standing and padding over to Shane. He nudged Shane's hand, then gently lay down with his head resting across Shane's feet. Is that a behavioral signal? Henix asked. Shane leaned back and looked at the ceiling. It's bedtime. Henix stood as well. I will return in the morning. I would like to observe his dream response patterns. Sure, but bring snacks. He gets moody. I will acquire appropriate treats. Shane watched him go, then looked down at the massive creature sprawled across his boots. You're not subtle. Brutus exhaled slowly, eyes already half-lidded. Shane didn't move, didn't want to. The pain in his ribs was still there, but dull now, manageable. He closed his eyes and let the quiet of the arboretum settle around them. No alarms, no threats, no meetings, just the soft buzz of nocturnal insects, the warmth of fur against his legs, and the faint trace of chlorophyll in the air. Tomorrow would probably bring another round of forms and protocol adjustments. But for tonight, everything was exactly where it needed to be.